This is the story of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. Employee number 427's job was simple. He sat at his desk in room 427 and he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor on his desk, telling him what buttons to push, how long to push them, and in what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year.
Every day
others
of
might have
every
considered
month
it soul-rending, Stanley
year.
relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day, something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on the monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had this happened, this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move for the longest time. But as he came to his he got up from his desk and stepped out of his office.
No, he didn't.
But Stanley simply couldn't handle the pressure. What if he had to make a decision? What if a crucial outcome fell under his responsibility? He had never been trained for that. No. This couldn't go any way except badly. The thing to do now, Stanley thought to himself, is to wait. Nothing will hurt me. Nothing will break me. In here I can be happy forever. I will be happy. Stanley waited. Hours passed, then days. Had years gone by? He no longer had the ability to tell. But the one thing he knew for sure, beyond any doubt, was that if he waited long enough, the answers would come. Eventually, someday, they would arrive. Soon, very soon now, this will end. He will be spoken to. He will be told what to do. Now it's just a little bit closer. Now it's even closer. Here it comes.
And he died of starvation. Or God knows. I mean... You're left with no answers.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo. No matter how hard Stanley looked, he couldn't find a trace of his co-workers.
Okay, guys. Yes, no.
It's bucket time.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left. Still no one was here. Stanley needed the bucket's warmth and comfort now more than ever. Perhaps his boss's office was where he'd find answers. Coming to a staircase, Stanley and the bucket walked upstairs to the boss's office.
I don't think I've done this
But
one for a
Stanley
minute.
just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, admitting he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, why had he taken that risk? All because he believed everyone had vanished? His boss would think he was crazy. And then, something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. He looked down at the bucket in his arms. Am I crazy? He asked the bucket. The bucket returned his gaze, but said nothing at all. All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
It's bucket time.
Stanley pressed the bucket upon every little thing in the office. Oh, please. Are you really just doing this for the trophy? Click a door 5 times? Is that all you think a trophy is worth? No. I can't just give these merits away for such little effort. A measly 5 clicks? Now, suppose you were to click the door 20. Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest and entered the door on his left. This was not the correct way to the meeting room. But Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? No, never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
No,
Said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift. Yeah, good.
Said the bucket.
Now ride the lift all the way to the top. There's something up there I need you to do.
Stanley did not question why or how this bucket was speaking to him. It should have alarmed him, of course, because buckets can't talk. But Stanley chose not to think about this obvious fact. He was firmly convinced that the bucket had spoken to him, and he unthinkingly did whatever the bucket asked.
In here.
Said the bucket.
Go into this dark room over here.
Stanley once again obeyed blindly.
Now pick up the phone.
Said the bucket.
Pick up the phone and it will take us back home.
Whoa, hold on. Why did you unplug the phone? Were you trying to resist the bucket's orders? Stanley, I was joking. Obviously, the bucket isn't talking to you and telling you to do things. Buckets can't talk. It was a joke. Don't you get the joke? It's funny, Stanley. A talking bucket. Can't you see? Oh, goodness. All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room.
It's bucket time.
Stanley clutched the bucket tightly to his chest. This was not the correct way to the meeting room, but Stanley had felt the bucket calling to him, telling him that the employee lounge was simply the place to be. And here it was. Had the bucket turned out to be correct? Never mind. The bucket was wrong. Stanley took the door on his left to go back to the meeting room.
No,
Said the bucket.
don't go to the meeting room. Go somewhere else. The cargo lift, yes. Go there. Go to the cargo lift.
Apparently I already got it. But yes, that all is a space, and yes, you can get down into it glitched, and like there really isn't squat in there. Except for one. Alright, Stanley. It's a little bit more Stanley, and then I'm going to Stanley off the Stanley. Malkovich. Which, yeah, great YouTuber who does his stuff. He's a prop master, does Scott Prop and Roll. Had a video, somebody asked him, who's the person playing a character that couldn't play any other character, or you know, couldn't have been any other actor for that character. John Malkovich, and being John Malkovich as John Malkovich. Because anybody else would have been confusing enough. I think of Kevin Costner, right? You got Kevin Costner playing John Malkovich as John Malkovich and being John Malkovich. Yeah. What do we have here? I can't tell what that is. I mean, you'd have to have a bajillion inch TV and super high def and extra zoom mode to read something like that. If the texture's even there. You know what I mean? Uh-oh. He didn't like what I did. cassette tapes. And 1 cassette tape and a cassette recorder. For those of you who don't get it, this is a fun piece.
Okay, this is day number 295, tape number... I don't even know. I've lost track. Nothing feels real anymore. The longer I study this bucket, the less sense anything makes. The sheer euphoria I feel every time I pick it up. No matter how many times I've done it, it's always the same feeling. And the emptiness in my chest when I set it down. It doesn't make sense. There's no explanation for it. Still haven't figured out why I see the world so differently when this bucket is in my arms. Why everything feels so... What do I do with this treasure? I can monetize it. Yes. It's unthinkable the amounts of money people will pay for even just an hour with the bucket.
Because nothing knows what a bucket knows.
It's my golden ticket.
Can you
But
imagine the
careful,
things a bucket has
because as
seen?
soon as this gets out, there's going to be a target on my back. Even now, I don't know who might be trying to get... What's that? Who's there?
There you go, guys.
All of his co-workers were gone. What could it mean? Stanley decided to go to the meeting room. Perhaps he had simply missed a memo.
It's off a left instead of right. I'm not going to leave the bucket this time.
When Stanley came to a set of 2 open doors, this was not the correct way to the meeting room, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. Perhaps he wanted to stop by the employee lounge first, just to admire it. The lounge was sublime, a work of art. But eager to get back to business, Stanley took the first open door on his left.
No, I didn't.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago.
Now Stanley does it without the bucket.
Stanley had now gotten himself so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun from so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun from so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun from so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun from so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun from so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun from so far off the beaten path that it seemed the office had begun from so far off the beaten path.
You didn't think I was actually just a recording, did you? What a silly and trite explanation that would be. All the back and forth between you and me, all the absurd adventures we've been through, and it all turns out I'm just a tape recording?
It was all just in Stanley's head. I bet that's the kind of twist you think is revelatory. I bet each and every time you watch a movie where it turns out all to be in the main character's imagination, you must absolutely bolt off the couch in pure shock at the phenomenal and intricate storytelling. It must be so simple to be you. Life being an unending waterfall of surprises and delights. How much more exciting you must find the world than the rest of us do. Now I've become sad. Look what you've done to me.
Right.
This is all your fault.
My fault. What'd I do? Anyways, that was enough Stanley. I'll see you guys. Have a good one.